Welcome to your new favorite podcast, Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks, with your hosts,
Monica.
Susan. Hi, welcome. I'm Susan.
I'm Monica.
And we are
Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks.
Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks. And how you doing, Monica?
I'm doing okay. Susan, how are you?
I'm hot.
Oh, God. Man, every day.
Normally I keep it frigid in my rooms, but not today.
Why not?
Because you don't want it frigid.
It's true. She freezes me out, man.
I long for the days of winter.
When you go to somebody's house, you shouldn't have to think about packing a sweater or a sweatshirt because you're going to freeze when you go to their house. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, there's that. So, needless to say, it's warm. I'm perspiring.
Well, this is central South Texas, kind of, and unfortunately for us, spring kind of turns into summer really quickly.
Yeah, we go from cool to it ain't cool no more.
Yeah. And I think the high today was supposed to be 95, if I read that correctly.
Yeah, maybe. I know we have a front coming through.
Really?
So I think, yeah, we do. There's a front that's going to come through, I think, Saturday, Sunday, something like that. The
Oh,
high's going to be like
yay.
70.
Yay.
I know, quite excited about that.
God,
Open up the windows.
That's great.
All right, so anyhow, enough about us. But today, we're here to talk about a National Park Service unit called Canyon de Chelly, which some people mistakenly call it Canyon de Chelly because that's how it looks like it's spelled, but that is not how you say it. You say Canyon de Chelly.
I always called it Canyon de Chelly, not Chelly, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, please enlighten me.
This has nothing to do with hiking or being outside. But on my side of the family, and, you know, I don't know about you, a lot of Hispanic people have like nicknames that their family gives them or their friends give them, and they usually have nothing to do with their names. Okay?
Oh, yeah. I have one of those.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, my grandmother, whose name was Juanita, everybody called her Chata. Don't know why. My aunt, whose first name was Erlinda, everybody called her Calula, shortened to Cal. Don't know where that came from. So when my brother, not too long after my brother was born, his name is Caesar. But for some reason, my aunt started calling him Chelly. Okay, so she'd call him Chelly. But one time, I guess she was looking for coffee mugs for all of us from wherever she was stationed, and she couldn't find any that said Chelly.
Imagine that.
So she found one that said Shelly.
Oh my gosh.
And bought him that. And so for some reason, that is stuck in my head. So every time I looked at this, I don't know why, but it was like Canyon de Chelly. So, which is wrong.
Which is
It's
wrong. It is wrong.
It is not Canyon de Chelly or Chelly.
Yeah, because I think the word de Chelly actually means canyon. So that, yeah.
Oh,
but,
Canyon de Canyon?
Yeah, but I'm sure we anglicized it by putting canyon.
True.
Something like that, probably.
So,
Go ahead.
how did you know it was Canyon de Chelly?
Funny that you ask. You know how I learned that it was Canyon de Chelly? My ignorance, but I'm going to share it with you because this is what we do. We share and we're open here, people. We have learning moments in life. So a couple of years back, a friend and I went to Monument Valley. Maybe some of y'all have been to Monument Valley. Really cool place. If you've watched Forrest Gump, you've seen Monument Valley because they do part of his running, and I think it goes through Monument Valley. But Monument Valley, well, not maybe actual Monument Valley, but down the road that goes by Monument Valley. Anyhow, so we were at Monument Valley, and so it's Navajo land, Monument Valley. It is not a national park site. It is Navajo land. And so you pay a fee to go do Monument Valley, and you drive around, and I'm glad I had a 4Runner because it was kind of bumpy in some places. But as you go on your route, they have locals that are selling their wares. So selling jewelry and, you know, things, right? And so we stopped and we were talking with them. And it was the coolest thing because they really gave us an insight into the Navajo that lived there in Monument Valley. And then we were like, oh, yeah, we're going to go down to Canyon de Chelly. And they're like, oh, that is not how you say that. learning moment for me because, I didn't know. And they corrected us to say, no, it's Canyon de Chelly. And so ever since then, in my head.
Well, that's great though, because you know, we are ignorant sometimes, and everything is an opportunity for learning. So why
Yeah.
not? That's great.
Well, and then you pass it on, right? So
Right.
passing it on to y'all, that whenever you see it somewhere, just know it's Canyon de Chelly. So So this is a national monument. Now, what's important about this national monument? Many things, but what is distinct about this national monument that is not like any other national monument in the National Park Service is that it is entirely on Navajo Tribal Trust land. It is entirely on Navajo land.
I found that to be the most fascinating part of everything when I read a little bit about the history about it.
Yeah, and there are like 40 families that live there. And there is a fascinating history online if you really want to know how it kind of came about being considered as a national monument. But it goes way back to like, I don't know, 1900. But I think before we get into that, what's important about this place is understanding that this is one of the places in the United States that has like the longest living history of people living on a land. And it goes back to the ancient peoples, to the Puebloans, and then the Puebloans then went down into the Hopi. The Hopi were kind of like a descendants of some of the Puebloans. And then from the Hopi, it became the Navajo. And what I thought was interesting about the Navajo, this is fascinating. Well, I thought it was fascinating, is that they are kind of descendants in a way of the Athabascans that are from Western Canada and Alaska.
Yeah, I think I've read that. Yes, I think that's fascinating too.
That's their language.
Yeah.
That they have a form of language that is Athabascan.
Yeah, I find that fascinating also.
Well, fascinating because it's like you figure it had to migrate all the way down
Exactly.
south, right?
Exactly.
That just blew my mind away because in my visits to Alaska and stuff, you meet or learn a lot about the Athabascans, and to hear and understand it now that kind of came down this way, I thought that was pretty cool.
I would like to just very quickly ask you to think or not forget later when you finish talking about this to explain the difference between why is it a national monument versus a national park
Oh, yeah.
or a national historic site.
Oh yeah, because there are differences with that.
Yeah.
So in early 1900s, actually, let me go back a little bit. There are some not great stories about how this land was attempted to be taken from the Navajo. So some of y'all might be familiar with Kit Carson. I think he was Colonel Kit Carson at the time. They were coming in trying to raid this canyon, and the Navajo that were here, and try as they might to protect themselves, they eventually get run over, right? And so it's called the Long Walk. If y'all are not familiar with the Long Walk, you should familiarize yourself with that. It's about a 300-mile walk that they made the Navajo walk to go be held to trial. And the conditions were horrible. Lots of Navajos died on the way down. And it was awful. And so probably around 1868 or so, they were allowed to kind of come back. Of course, there wasn't anything to come back to. They had to figure out how to do this world now that they're in when everything they had was gone. The animals that they raised, the crops that they had, the orchards they had. And so they had to restart all of this. And this is also now where they started picking up how to do trade because they learned how to do that. And this is where trading posts also came in.
Oh, I had no idea.
It's pretty cool. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
I know what you mean. It's interesting in that I mean they didn't have a choice. They had to shift whatever it was they were doing to survive, and I get it. So, but I had no idea that's how trading posts started.
Yeah, they started, and they started to learn that that's how what they needed to do to survive in this area, and then you would get other like scientific people that would come down to the canyons and start looking around and then start to realize, ooh, there's some important stuff in these neck of the woods, like things that maybe we should be preserving. And so they were like, saying, oh, we need a superintendent of this area to protect the relics and things. And then they nominate a guy, and that guy ended up basically selling the relics. So that wasn't good. So eventually they came around. It's like, we really need to preserve this as a nation, preserve it. And what was interesting is that from about the 1900s to like 1931, when it finally became a national monument, it was a lot of back and forth about how they would do this, because the indigenous folks, the Navajo, were like, we don't want you taking our land away. We know what you want to do, but we don't want you to take our land away. And essentially, how they came to an agreement was that everything that was down in the canyon would stay Navajo, and be managed by however the Navajo wanted to manage it. Everything that was above the canyon, above on the the mesas basically, would be responsibility of, say, the National Park Service, right? So roads and things constructed that way. That way, the Navajo were not required to have to spend monies, right, to make this the national monument. The United States would pay for that. So
Oh, so we actually worked with them.
I'd like to say that's what we did, but.
Oh.
Yeah, so again, this history, you can get a lot of information off the National Park Service website. And there is a long history about this back and forth that happened, because the Navajo were like, just don't take any of our land. Just don't take any of our land, and we're willing to work with you, right? Just make sure we don't lose anything in the process. And the United States is like, oh yeah, we're fine, we're good, we gotcha. Well, the one of the biggest issues that they had was the western boundary of Canyon de Chelly, and trying to determine where that was. They could figure out, rim to rim, everything in the middle kind of, is fine. That can all be Navajo. And they did like a mile back, I think, from the rim is where the line was. And they could do that, and they could, put that on paper and everything. But the Navajo ended up saying, but we need actual land markers, like something that we can tie to go, yeah, that's our
That
our
denotes
line.
the boundaries. Yeah.
Right. So that took a lot of back and forth.
So did they come up with something?
Well, yeah, they came up with something. I don't know how satisfactory it was, because even through the 1900s, there was still some quibbling about whose land was whose, and where the boundaries were. But they essentially got to that point that they could. And in the Navajo, and if you go to Canyon de Chelly, you really need to visit the visitor center, talk to the people in the visitor center, and they usually have an exhibit. Like when I was there was an exhibit of an artist who had photographs and things, and it kind of told the story of the things that are in the canyon. You need to spend time there understanding that. A lot of people go to Canyon de Chelly because it is recognized kind of as a miniature Grand Canyon, because it is really pretty. But don't just go there for the view. You want to go there for the education of why this land was important to preserve, and the thousands of years of people living in this place.
I always find it interesting when I visit places where indigenous Native American people have lived. One of the places that I really enjoyed going to and I'd like to go back to soon is Acoma, Sky City in New Mexico. And then also the Taos Reservation outside of Taos in New Mexico. But every time I've gone to those places, they tell you this is the oldest established living, where people have lived since forever.
Yeah, in memoriam.
And so each one of them is like, we're the oldest spot where people have lived. So when you said that, I was like, oh, okay. I think that Acoma and Taos Reservation are going to have an issue with that. But the thing is, I would be willing to bet, without not knowing a lot about history, but I would be willing to bet that there have been people living in those areas longer than any of us can even imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Without moving, the families and generations upon generations of people living there that have lived there, and probably across all three of those and maybe more places that we don't even know about.
And it's interesting because the Puebloans, after the ancient peoples, the Puebloans that were there, they were there for a little bit, and then it was like they had farmed what they could farm, and they needed to find new places, right? So that's why they left. And the same thing with the Hopi. The Hopi were there. They did what they could do with the land. Eventually, they needed to move on. But it was really the Navajo that came there and really were making it work. And so they were really there a good long while, other than being kicked out for a while and then having to come back to basically nothing. But that the canyons hold the stories, and this is how they figure that these people have been here for so long, is that because they really held the stories of the people who lived in these caves and these cliff dwellings, And that was what they were trying to preserve as a national monument.
Okay, because I've never been to Canyon de Chelly. I've been to Mesa Verde. So
Yeah.
are the cliff houses similar to
I think
those?
Mesa Verde is probably more,
Better preserved?
yeah,
Okay.
than what you see in Canyon de Chelly, because some of the places have weathered, and then of course they were kind of ransacked for a lot of the relics and things, so people
Right.
could go and sell them. Yeah, so they're not as pronounced, I would say, as Mesa Verde is.
Okay.
But again, a national monument means that there's something that's significant that has happened here. And so some of that significance is that the people that have inhabited this area and how they lived and trying to preserve that history is really why they wanted to set aside this land. The United States recognized that we need to do something because the Navajo, and it wasn't to take it away from the Navajo, it was really the conversations with the Navajo, like, you don't probably have the resources to protect this as we will have the resources to help protect it. And that's really where we were coming from the United States, is that we recognize how special a place that this is. One thing I thought that was interesting, and this is a cool thing that I was reading about, is that they had issues with sonic booms in Canyon de Chelly.
Really?
Yeah, like, I don't know, I would say it was like in the 60s. And so they were reporting it like to the National Park Service, and the National Park was like, yeah, whatever. And they're like, no, really, we're having these sonic booms that are happening. And then they would keep track of them. And in, a month, you could have like a couple hundred sonic booms. And they said, this is what's happening is that these sonic booms are causing our structures to fall
wow.
apart. And it was true. And it was the Air Force. So from there, they figured, we need to work at making sure that these types of activities, say from the Air Force or whoever may be making noise in the area, that they figure out how, routes or ways that they can get around some of the national park
Was the
lands.
sound just reverberating through the canyon or what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it would shake and crumble, and they couldn't say, it was only because of the sonic booms, right? But that and weathering was causing that happening on a rapid rate. So, yeah, they did something about that.
Wow. So, in comparison to the Grand Canyon, how big? I've heard about Canyon de Chelly being, compared to it as a smaller version. And there's another place in Texas where I hear is like a mini Grand Canyon. What
Palo
is that?
Duro Canyon.
Palo Duro Canyon,
Yeah.
right. So, have you been to Palo Duro?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I have not. I've driven past the sign, but I've not been there. So, comparatively to the Grand Canyon, what would you say?
It's definitely a small version of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
It has that same feel because I think it's 1,000 feet deep. Like when what they call the mouth of Canyon de Chelly is like, I don't know, 30 feet. And then as you go deeper into the canyon, it becomes like 1,000 feet from the surface. But the types of things that you see in the Grand Canyon are similar to what you see because there was water that was flowing through Canyon de Chelly, just like you have water that flows in Grand Canyon. There's a spire called Spider Rock, which is a unique structure that is kind of like out there in the middle of not a whole lot, but it's a spire and it looks really cool that a lot of people like to go and take a look at. And so it looks very similar. So if you ever wanted to get that feel of the Grand Canyon, go to Canyon de Chelly.
Can you access the pit houses? I mean, the cliff houses like you can at Mesa Verde and do the tours?
There are some tours that are available. One of the sticking points that the Navajo had with the National Park Service, which I thought was interesting, was that they wanted to be able to make some money off of the tourism. And so they are actually the ones who can rent the horses to visitors if they want to come. And I don't know if that's still the case, but that has been the case, that the Navajo make the money off of doing that. There are some guided tours, but I don't know if it's actually into the dwellings, the cliff dwellings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
But there are 3 canyons that make up Canyon de Chelly as well. So it's Canyon de Chelly, it's Canyon del Muertos.
Del Muertos.
And then it's Canyon, there's another canyon. There's like 3 canyons. Yeah, Monument Canyon. Oh, yeah, there you go. So there are 3 canyons that make up this Canyon de Chelly.
Okay. And again, since I've never been there and I am learning along with the rest of y'all, how would you say the hikes are? Are there easy hikes for people that aren't, big hikers?
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I don't believe that there are many hikes at all. There is a north rim and a south rim. They're both like 30 some odd miles long. The north rim, I believe, takes you to more of the structures, if you will. The southern rim is the one that most people go on because it is the most scenic view. I think they might have a couple of hikes. It was not a place that I'm like, oh, let me go get my hiking sticks and go hike.
Okay. So if you were to go visit these places, it's not you're not going to be getting ready for any kind of a
Long
hike or anything that's going to take you through some places that you can see with some information.
And part of that, it was intended that way to some extent because
Right.
there are 40 families that still live within the canyon walls.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like when you visit Monument Valley, is that you are on Navajo land and they live in Monument Valley. So
Right.
you don't take like a stroll off across the whatever land because you could be walking in somebody's backyard. So I find it similar because you can see some housing that's down below in the canyon.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense because again, comparing it to Taos, it's not that you have any place to hike in that reservation, but you are walking through it. And of course, people's homes are there, but are there homes down in the canyon? Or okay, so
I mean, because it's still there are animals, there are farms, there are housing. I mean, people live there. There was a sticking point about too much livestock, and so the United States was like, you got to get rid of some, and so there was some beef about beef. There was some beef about that.
okay,
No pun intended, but it happened. So it's been an interesting thing, this, working together, the Navajo and the National Park Service, to try to make it good for everyone. But yeah, there's a lot to see. There are hikes to get down to some overlook areas, but they're not huge hikes. You could take your sticks because I always take my sticks because it's uneven ground. So I always take my sticks for those. But they're not particularly long. They're just kind of walkways. Some of them are accessible that, if you have strollers or what have you, you could also take those.
are those where they live? Are they? Because I know in some of the other places like Taos and also Sky City, on the Mesa part, they don't have electricity and running water. Do they have that there?
That's a really good question because I don't remember seeing anything.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember seeing anything on the drive.
Well, I noticed when I was reading up on the history, I saw like areas where the rainwater would collect.
Yeah.
And I know like up in Acoma, they don't have running water, but they have cisterns, and they collect the rainwater, and that's what they use to do with the water. So I was just wondering if it was kind of a similar thing.
Everything pretty much you got to do it at the visitor center as far as I was concerned, but yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, so no hikes to prep for, but
Not
you're
necessarily.
still going to want to take, some precautions, especially if you're going in sunny weather. You're going to want to wear, your hat and maybe some sweat wicking clothes or, easy pants, hiking pants.
Because it does get warm there.
Yeah.
I have gone in January I went in March and there was still snow on the ground too. So you kind of have to kind of make sure you're looking at the weather.
Yeah.
But it is a dry area. I mean, it's just dry in terms of heat and stuff. It's just dry. There's not a whole lot of humidity, but you definitely want to take your water. You want to be covered from the sun. You want to make sure you have your camera so you can take a camera. And there are locals that are selling their wares in the parking lots where you're going to pull
Nice.
off to, look at whatever the site is that you're looking for.
Snack check.
It's snack check.
But you know what? Just a quick word on when locals are selling their stuff. If you see something that you like, I would much rather buy it from a local who's selling it right there, because when you get into a downtown area and go to those nice fancy stores and you find the same or similar items there, those prices are like twice, three times what you're going to pay from the local person, the local artist who's selling it there, and they're not going to get as much of the cut of or the profit from that.
That's true.
So I kicked myself in the butt for the first time when I went to Acoma. There were people selling pottery there, and that's my favorite
Oh my
pottery.
gosh.
Acoma pottery is my all-time favorite. And I was like, it was expensive. It wasn't cheap, but I thought, well, I'll come back later. And I mean, what was I thinking? It was on a mesa. You had to take a bus up there. I don't know why I thought I'd come back later. I'm an idiot because then I go downtown and you go into those art galleries where they're selling. It's like 3 times what they were asking for it down there. So my recommendation to you would be to, if you have the money and you like it, buy it there.
Yeah, and the other thing too, which I can't, I guess, underscore enough, is talk to the folks because they're local folks.
Yes.
And they want to share their stories.
Yes.
And they're willing to answer your questions. As naive as it may seem sometimes, me asking some of the questions, it was like, but I learned from them. I learned their stories. And like, we bought a piece of jewelry from one of the guys. He hammers silver. And he was telling us about how he's actually really well known. He was written up in some magazine. I can't remember what magazine he was written up in about the jewelry that he makes because it's all handmade and what have you and stuff. And it's like they want to tell their story about their craft of something that they do and they've been working on their lives, right?
Probably their parents before them and their grandparents
Exactly.
before them doing the same thing. They've learned from the time that they were a child. So
yeah, definitely worth it. So I just say get out there and go see it.
And even though there's not going to be a whole lot of hiking here, you're still gonna get something out of it.
Because again, we're about cultural, natural, and historical. You can get all of that there too.
Yeah. So if you found any value in this, we would really appreciate you subscribing. At the bottom lower right-hand corner of this video as you're watching it, there is a button. Click it, please, and it will have you subscribe to our podcast. If you can like it, share this, please. And
ask us questions. Suggest where we should go next.
Exactly. Or if you wanna know when our next podcast is coming out, please ring that little bell thing. Don't. And just please stop. No, don't. Oh, I got to remember to say that a different way next time, don't I?
I'm going to get it every time.
Y'all give me suggestions on how to say that differently. But yeah, we appreciate your comments and your kindness. And
we'll catch you next time,
we'll
right?
catch you next time. Hike your own hike.
Hike your own hike. We'll see y'all later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.